And I mean, of course, the Sphinx is in general much older than the pyramid, or at least its part above ground, because rock cut is usually always older than stuff built out of blocks. But again, the Sphinx being older than the pyramid by itself is kind of useless for providing absolute dating in terms of years, because in reality we know very little about the dating of the pyramid itself, and it is even more complicated because of its numerous layers. Next point. Now, let's assume that this is indeed water erosion only, and it is a result of rainfall, although there are other theories that erosion like this can be observed even without water in the desert, but anyhow, this is irrelevant. How do we know that the last period with rainfalls was 12,000 years ago? Definitely we don't know about that. I mean, the mainstream sources contradict each other to such an extent about this that to take it as a genuine coin is absurd. Next point. If you visit this, by the way, very rich and wonderful online resource of images, you can browse various albums with old photographs of the land of Osiris from the time when the sites were not yet ravaged by the modern restorators and conservators. And if you spend a couple of days browsing them, as I did, you will notice that on many temples there is very similar erosion, and they definitely belong to a much later period. For example, there was an alley of ram sphinxes on both sides. Actually, there are many such valleys, not just the famous one in Luxor. So that alley had rows of rams on both sides, and the left side was very well preserved, as all the other normal sphinxes and rams we see, while the left side, it had a level of erosion like the Sphinx. So that's also a point to consider. And one last point about the Sphinx being older than 12,000 years ago. Well, what was the weather 12,000 years ago? We have no clue, but we know for sure that the official story is a deliberate lie. Yes, heavily sponsored, with bribes and forcing scientists to sign things they don't really mean, as I have covered in previous videos. I mean, how would we believe them? How was it 12,000 years ago if they're obviously lying of how it was even hundreds of years ago? So as a conclusion, the Sphinx is old, but this doesn't mean it's 12,000 years old. There is no proof about that at all, except the honest word of the penguins. Do you believe them? If you still do, even a little bit, let me tell you what scams they run with this allegedly ancient artifact. The bust of Nefertiti is made of limestone covered with plaster, a very soft material, and yet they expect us to believe that it laid in the ground for 3,360 years exactly, and then was found in this pristine condition. Just compare it with this bust, made of harder material, dated to the very same period, and on the top of that, excavated from an area with way more favorable conditions for preservation, namely much less humidity. The bust of Nefertiti was found in a workshop practically on the shore of the Nile. So they expect us to believe that it was soaked in mud and water for 3,360 years, and then it came out brand new. In addition to this, when modern imagery devices were invented which allowed to see inside things without destroying them, it became clear for those who examined that the broken off ear is an attempt to artificially age the item. The tests showed that these damages were actually in caused on the air in very recent times, at the times when it was allegedly restored after being found. Very similar situation with the eye. The eye is actually encrusted from a different material. So since it was made as a forgery, they made only one eye to make it look like it has been damaged. But when the latest penetrating imagery devices were used, they found out that the eye with the missing encrust was never meant to receive such encrust, because that would involve drilling a hole in it to insert it, like the eye which had the encrust. So here they are assuring us that this is a genuine artifact because it has been found in this workshop of this ancient sculptor. But when the previous points surfaced, and not from alternative history researchers, but by mainstream scientists themselves, they tried to find out, let's see, where are the actual records of finding anything like this where they say it has been found. And it turned out that during these excavations, really such excavations existed. Everything was meticulously documented day by day, along with sketches and full descriptions. There was no mention of such artifact at all. And I listed only some of the reasons for which many scientists are convinced that this is just an obviously modern fake. And there has been a discussion within the scientific communities, of course, only to declare this as fake and remove it from the museum. But of course, this is not yet done, and some of the reasons quoted for not doing it is losing revenue to the museum. So this was just yet another reminder of how trustworthy are the mainstream stories, and if you believe them, then you can believe the story that 12,000 years ago things were blown up, and then some simple people in Egypt found ruins and built simple things on the top of them. So, is it really that bad? Do we know really so little about ancient Egypt actually? In reality, yes, but there is a good news that although we have chosen to close our eyes for it, we still live in an absolutely magical world, exactly as magical as it was for the people who lived during dynastic times. And sometimes, for some people, magical bridges still open. A British-born woman, subsequently known by the nickname Seti, proved very well within the scientific community that she really has special sources for knowing things, because number of times she revealed what is to be found during the excavations before the actual excavations took place. And her source of knowledge was the pharaoh Seti I himself, who used to initially speak to her on astral level, and he revived a past life connection. When he was a pharaoh, she was a temple girl, and they had a love affair which ended not so happily. So initially, Seti I, being highly skilled in magic himself, he could communicate with her on astral level, and at later stages, when she actually got divorced, he even materialized in a human form of flesh to continue the love affair which they had long time ago. He used to do it by drawing power from the kundalini of her current human body. As a result of that, she aged prematurely, by the way. But anyhow, that's a private story. The question is, what did we do, the modern humans, after we had a verified case of somebody who could serve literally as a bridge to the past? Somebody who could ask questions directly to the pharaoh face to face. What did we do? The most suitable things we can do for being such superficial jellyfishes? Absolutely nothing. I did not find a single hint anywhere that after she was recognized by the scientific community that she was used or requested to channel any meaningful historic data, except minor details on temple excavations. I mean, this is just too little. Maybe because Seti herself, she studied mainstream Egyptology, and I didn't find any hint that she doubted what she studied. So, from whatever data I found of what she said, she never had any doubts or really much question to ask. Then what about the pharaoh himself? Was there an attempt on his side to communicate, like any information on the history of Egypt? I mean, even if it confirms the mainstream history, any information? Not at all. He was on his personal visit to his lost lover, and when once with her astral vision opened, she ended up in the treasury of the temple of Abydos. There was a small discussion about it, and he himself said that he is guarding it from being discovered. And not mainly because the riches would be, of course, stolen and will disappear in private collections or numbered boxes or whatever, it doesn't matter, it won't be for us. But his main concern was a book on very powerful practical magic. And he did not say that I don't want it to end up in the hands in that small group of bad people who govern your world. No, he said frankly, the people are not ready for this. And here I want to just add my personal experience of approaching the ancient spirits of the Amazon jungle. I wasn't that lucky to be able to get one of them to talk to me in an understandable language and answer all my questions, but they did answer my prayers and showed me things. And the very first and most important thing they showed me was how I was deceiving myself that I'm a good person. Because I'm a good person according to the modern standards we have about that, but from angelic point of view, I was terrible. So right from very beginning they made it clear, if you're considering to apply for the magical world of the angels, you'll have to clean yourself according to the angelic standards and not according to the standards that you hear on TV. And I can guarantee you that this is the main problem for which we don't understand, and we cannot understand how the Egyptians built all this, because their society was based on practical magic, and we are like miles away from understanding even the basics of that. And the angels, they're not willing to come amongst us and teach us directly as they used to do. We are literally quarantined. We are literally